Heya Cryptozens, it's 10 p.m. Pacific time. My name is Nikodemus, and welcome back to the Crypto Overnighter, where we take a nightly look at the crypto, NFT, and metaverse space. And keep in mind, nothing in this show should ever be considered financial advice. It's Wednesday, November 9th, and welcome to the halfway point of a momentous week. Lots going on today, and you know I'm going to get to the latest news on the fallout of the FTX Alameda apocalypse, and there's lots going on where that goes, but we've had other significant event in the United States last night. I'm talking about the midterm elections. Granted, some, like Senator Cynthia Lummis, didn't have an election to contend with this year. All of the House of Representatives and the third of the Senate was up for re-election last night, though. As I write this, control of the U.S. Senate is still uncertain. Republicans are in the lead, 49 seats to 48, with 3 seats yet to be counted. Georgia, Nevada, and Arizona are the seats that are still available. The latest word is that Georgia is headed for a runoff on December 6th. It appears that control of the House of Representatives will go to the Republicans, while a Democrat still sits in the White House. So you might think of that in the middle of the election returns, U.S. legislators and policymakers aren't really thinking about crypto. You might think that, but you'd be wrong. Representative Patrick McHenry is a Republican from North Carolina. He's also the top Republican in the House Financial Services Committee. He took time to comment on the FTX situation. He said, quote, "The recent events show the necessity of congressional action. It's imperative that Congress establish a framework that ensures Americans have adequate protections while also allowing innovation to thrive here in the United States." So let's look at the results. First, I'd like to mark the passage of a noted crypto policy guy, Senator Pat Toomey from Pennsylvania. The ranking Republican on the Senate Banking Committee chose not to run for re-election. His voice will be missed. Also, Rob Portman is retiring from the U.S. Senate. He said he was retiring because it is, quote, harder and harder to break through the partisan gridlock and make progress on substantive policy. In question is the result of the Senate race in Arizona. Senator Mark Kelly presently leads Republican Blake Masters in that race. That said, we may not know the results of that race for some time. During the election proceedings yesterday, a significant percentage of the voting machines malfunctioned. The net result of that means that Arizona's results might be delayed by days. This one is significant, as Masters is backed, in part, by Peter Thiel. He co-authored Thiel's book, 0 to 1. And so Thiel reportedly used crypto to financially support Masters in his race. He also supported J.D. Vance in his campaign to unseat incumbent Tim Ryan, a Democrat from Ohio. Vance previously disclosed he's holding up to $250,000 in Bitcoin. On the other hand, Ryan did say that he supported legislation that simplified crypto tax reporting requirements. Democrat Glenn Ivey won his race in Maryland. Francis Coney Lee is another digital asset-friendly Democrat. Now, Coney Lee is down in his race against the Republican, but that House seat hasn't been called yet. Minnesota Representative Tom Emmert also won his bid, but so did crypto enemy Brad Sherman from California. As far as governors go, Democrat Gavin Newsom was reelected. In May, he signed an executive order aimed at establishing a regulatory framework for crypto, but he also vetoed legislation that would establish a licensing and regulatory framework for digital assets. Republican Chris Sununu won re-election with 50% of the vote. He also issued an executive order. His order, issued last February, established a commission to study digital assets in crypto. Another Republican, Texas Governor Greg Abbott, was also re-elected. He's described himself as a, quote, crypto law proposal supporter. And in fact, he did support legislation that would recognize digital assets under Texas commercial law. As far as all that goes, to me, it comes down to the committees and the chairmanships. With the Republicans taking the House, that means McHenry very well likely will end up chairing the Financial Services Committee. Given his pro-crypto nature and the nature of his role as HFSC chair, you'll likely see more crypto-related bills going through the House than you've seen so far from the Democrats. Senator Cynthia Lummis did take some time out to talk about what's going on with FTX and SBF. She said, quote, "The recent events that have transpired between FTX and Binance are the clearest example yet of why we need clear rules of the road for digital asset exchanges in the United States." Now, she ported to the bill that she's sponsoring with Senator Gillibrand, the Lummis-Gillibrand Responsible Financial Innovation Act. Now, look at it from her point of view. CZ kicks things off, tweeting his intention to dump a bunch of FTT on the market. He tweeted that out, and FTT was at around $22 a piece. As I write this, FTT is sitting at $1.67. That is a precipitous drop in just a couple of days off of nothing more than a news article and a few tweets between billionaires. So I see her point when she says, quote, "Market manipulation, lending activity, and whether customer funds and assets were appropriately safeguarded are just a few of the many issues my colleagues and I need to consider in the coming days." Now, as far as the Securities Exchange Commission Chair Gary Gensler goes, this is all part of a wider trend in crypto. He was speaking at a conference hosted by the Healthy Markets Association when he said, quote, "What we've seen in the last 2 days, if I can sort of step back from it a bit, it's really part of a pattern of what we've seen over the past 6 or 8 months. Investors get hurt when we don't rely upon time-tested public policy guardrails." In fact, he said that he doesn't see anything different about the last 2 days from the last 8 months. As far as blame goes, he attributes that to a, quote, "lack of disclosure, opacity. We've seen the use of other people's money and trading ahead." The way he sees it, Congress has been undermining the SEC's efforts in its current crop of crypto legislation. He said, quote, "As Congress looks at this field, as Congress thinks about it, it's really important here not to undermine our $100 trillion capital markets, not to pass a legislative vehicle that undermines these time-tested important thoughts." Now, to be sure, he didn't mention SBF or FTX or CZ or Binance, but it was pretty clear who he was talking about when he said, quote, "There's some legislation on the Hill I do not think meets the test. I think it undermines the securities laws. Just to note, some of that legislation was promoted by some of the same folks that failed in the last day or two. And you sort of wonder why. Because it was too light touch. So we're going to continue what we're doing." So it appears that unless Congress acts, it looks like Gensler is planning on continuing to press forward with his regulation by enforcement strategy. And it looks like some enforcement may be making its way towards FTX and Alameda Research, because Chair Gensler's SEC as well as the Commodities Future Trading Commission are taking a look into FTX's liquidity crunch. Specifically, they're going to be taking a look at how FTX handled customer funds. They're also trying to get a handle on FTX and FTX US's organizational structures. So they're looking at any crossover between the two, but they also want to see a separation between organizational funds and customer funds. In fact, the SEC and the CFTC both have investigations that go back several months that started out as a probe into FTX US. Apparently, these investigations are related to underlying conditions that caused the current crisis. And so they've already been looking into the relationship between FTX, FTX US, and Alameda Research. Now, these accusations that FTX loaned out consumer funds directly counters statements made by SBF that said that FTX doesn't rehypothecate customer assets. Then again, he also said that FTX has enough to cover all client holdings, so there's that. This follows an investigation started by the Texas Securities Board that got underway last month. In addition to the liquidity crisis, FTX is looking at a legal crisis. Complicating matters is the fact that the bulk of FTX's legal and compliance team quit. According to the news outlet Semaphore, most of the legal and compliance staff quit Tuesday evening. This was right in the middle of Binance and their due diligence process. Semaphore also reports that FTX was looking for a bailout of more than $1 billion from Silicon Valley and Wall Street billionaires before Binance announced the non-binding letter of intent. And so we know now that the bailout plan is not going to happen. Less than 48 hours after signing the non-binding letter of intent, Binance has announced that they're not going through with the deal. That letter outlined 3 potential outcomes: either buying FTX outright, a partial acquisition of assets, or just walk away. CZ chose to walk away. Quote, as a result of corporate due diligence, as well as the latest news reports regarding mishandled customer funds and alleged U.S. agency investigations, we have decided that we will not pursue the potential acquisition of FTX.com. Now, what Binance said was that they were in it to help the customers out with liquidity, but they said that the issues were, quote, beyond our control or ability to help. Every time a major player in an industry fails, retail consumers will suffer. We have seen over the last several years that the crypto ecosystem is becoming more resilient, and we believe in time that outliers that misuse user funds will be weeded out by the free market. This pretty much puts a pin in this part of the FTX saga. I can't say I'm too surprised that it ended up this way. As we've talked about last night, regulators do have the ability to step in and stop mergers and acquisitions like this. Plus, the word was that Binance wouldn't even consider the deal if it didn't include FTX US. So, there you go. We are going to leave it there for a very busy Wednesday night. We are still monitoring the election returns with an eye towards how this will affect the crypto space. I want to thank you, my listeners, because when you stop listening, I will stop talking. We'll see you tomorrow night.